Namaskar, very good afternoon. Dear friends, welcome to online CEC lectures. I, Dr. Renewal, welcome you back as to discuss a new topic, which is educational planning for progressive school. First of all, we shall try to understand that why do we need educational planning. Educational planning has two words in it. One is educational and second is planning. So that means planning is being done for certain objectives which are fulfilled by education. So first of all, let us try to understand what education is. Education is the key that unlocks the door for the development of any nation. It is the instrument that facilitates political, economic, social and technological development of a country. For education to play its key role on the transformation of nation, it needs to be adequately, effectively planned, because a faulty educational planning can jeopardize. It can take away country's development for decades. It can affect the country's development for decades. Therefore, there is importance of educational planning for the development of the nation. Secondly, let us try to understand what is planning, what are its characteristics, how it is to be done by the people, the managers, the administrators at different level. What are its key components? That also we will try to understand it. First of all, let us try to unravel another aspect of the lecture, which is educational planning for progressive school. Progressive school, when we are saying, then let us try to understand what kind of planning or why the planning at all is needed for school, and what do we understand by progressive school. Educational planning in its broadest generic sense is the application of rational, systematic analysis to the process of educational development with the aim of making education more effective and efficient in responding to the needs and goals of students and society. This definition I have quoted for Coombs. So from this definition, what we can gather is that as a generic way, in a generic way also, the educational planning means there is going to be rational, systematic analysis. What is going to be analyzed? If we want something to be analyzed, that means we have to observe it. We have to create certain hypotheses. There has to be certain data available. Statistics have to be applied, and accordingly we have to come out with, imply certain decisions or certain observations. So now let us talk about what do we understand by progressive school. Progressive school means the school which wants to progress. And when will it progress? It will progress if it understands two things. One, its current scenario. Second, it understands where it is aiming to be. That means after 10 years, 20 years, where the school aims to be. Now, who is going to do the planning for that progressive school? The planning for that progressive school is to be done at two levels. One is by the people who are at the helm of the affair. That is the policy framers, the planners. They have to do the planning. They have to do the planning for the school as a system, for all the school organizations. They have to give policy perspective. They have to plan for it. They have to allocate funds. So here, now when we are talking about allocation of funds, providing policies, providing guidelines, providing rules and regulation, here we are talking about two bodies. One is the bodies who are like the central government, the state government, Apart from that, there are certain affiliating bodies. When we are talking about the school, we are talking about the boards also, CBSE boards, ICSE boards, because they are also responsible for coming out with the policies. They decide that in which direction schools should be moving, so that the children we are creating in our schools as adults, as citizens, they are of use tomorrow, they are of importance tomorrow, they are satisfied in their lives tomorrow. So looking at the different aspects which are there in the society, community, globally, as well as looking at the aspects which we want, we desire to be accepted, to be absorbed by our students. So accordingly, they have to plan. So here, planning is being done first of all by the central government, who is deciding the policy based upon the 5-year policy it is given, or the policies like NEP 2020 which has been introduced, which talk about the school education at great length. Before that we had Kothari Commission. Apart from that we had Program of Action 92. Then there have been different committees which have been formed, like Ishpal Committee, who also gave certain recommendations for the improvement of schools. So these are the people who are at the periphery as far as school organization is concerned, but they are having a very important role in decision making. And then after that, there are bodies like who are controlling the affiliating bodies, particularly when the school, as I have already informed, that when we talk about the school, then that means we are talking about the boards as well. And of course, we are talking about the government, central government and state government, because both the governments may have the different interest or different expectations depending upon the requirement which they think are important from the perspective, or the situation which varies. Situation may vary based upon the fact that what kind of regional diversity the state has, what kind of discrepancies are being observed in the system at the level of the state. So accordingly they are on the one, because they are the one who are monitoring. Now just to take an example from Delhi. In Delhi, if the decision has to be taken that whether the school is to be opened, who is going to take it? It's not going to be taken by CBSE, because CBSE is responsible for policy framing. They are the responsible for judging as well as creating a system, a qualitative system for the education, the school system. This would be decided by the state government, like Directorate of Education over here. Similarly, the decisions will be taken at the state government level. So these are the people who are involved, these are the agencies, these are the organizations, these are the bodies who are involved in the planning, but on a very higher level. Then of course there are people who are involved at the grassroots level. When we talk about grassroots level, we are not just talking about the head of the institutions, that is principal or the teachers. Here we are also addressing the people who are directly involved, the parents, the students, the supervisors, the people who represent community. Like when we talk about PTA, Parents Teacher Association, we do have nominee from the Panchayati Raj system as well, because they are the people who are available at the grassroots level and they understand their community and society in a best possible manner. So they can provide the best possible solutions also. So progressive school requires planning at all the levels. But most importantly, it requires planning at the grassroots level. In today's lecture, we shall be talking about characteristics and principles of educational planning. When we will be talking about characteristics and principles of educational planning, here we would also be trying to address the planning as it is being done at the state level or the central level or the apex body, and we shall also be taking into cognizance the planning which is being done by the people who are available at the grassroots level. So Now let us talk about characteristics. The first characteristic which we need to understand is what is the nature of educational planning. We need to understand, we need to unravel its meaning. Thereby we will be able to reach the understanding of the concept of educational planning, as well as we would be able to understand that why is it required and how it is to be done. First thing which educational planning require is forecasting. Forecasting means describing or defining or determining events, conditions and needs for some future point in time. Because as I said, planning is to be done for the future. Future may be today's evening or tomorrow or 5 years ahead or 10 years ahead or 50 years ahead. So forecasting has to be done keeping in view needs of some future point in tomorrow. It implies forecasting or projection of important factors in education such as number and type of students and expansion of facilities needed for them. These are the aspects which should be available. Let me repeat myself again. To project or to forecast, the important factors which are required are number and types of students as well as facilities needed for them. Now let us talk about the second aspect of educational planning, that is interpretation. What does interpretation means? Interpretation means interpreting the future data and its translation into competencies or operational capabilities, which demands what kind of expectation does the future have. So after having forecasted what is expected, we have to interpret the future's data, and then it has to be worded into competencies or operational capabilities which are demanded, which are required. The third aspect of educational planning for progressive school is to decide goals and objectives. Educational planning is a means of generating relevant present and future goals and objectives for the organization. When we discuss or talk about what are goals and objectives, the goals and objectives may vary not just from the level at which educational planning or the type of educational planning which is done. It may also vary from one institution to another. But today, as we are discussing about creating a progressive school through educational planning, so we would be saying that the goals and objectives have to be visionary. One, they have to be such that they are practical in approach. Thirdly, we have to have educational objectives which will help the education system to generate resources in future. And which are the resources which are being generated by education or the schools? They are their alumni, future citizens, and the people who are tomorrow shall become president, prime ministers, ministers, actors, designers, artists. They are being created by the school, and for that school should be knowing what are its goals and objectives. There are certain schools which are very well known for creating players. There are schools in Indian society itself which are known for creating bureaucrats because they created that as their goals and objectives. How has it been done? It has been done based upon the forecasting. There they do restrict the entry level also. Then they are focused on those goals and objectives only. So because of the fact that what kind of goals and objectives the organization has decided upon, accordingly we decide the educational planning. The fourth most important aspect is decision making. What does decision making means? Educational planning means it's a preparation of pre-course in the decision making process. It is to be helped to determine the optimal decision or choice rendered. That means based upon forecasting. After having forecasted, what was the second step which we took? interpretation. We have interpreted the data into the words, and after having interpreted the data into the words, interpreting data means, suppose, just to give an example, suppose there was forecasting done based upon the fact that the school as an organization wants to, in the future, after 5 years or 10 years, wants to create artists. So because this is the forecasting with respect to the time frame, this is what they have defined or determined with reference to the future point. So if this is the projected or desired factor, then they have to do the statistical study. Based upon the statistical study, they have to find out that what kind of students intake should be there. What kind of conditioning should they be providing to the students? What kind of teaching has to be done? What kind of teachers have to be taken? How it would be done? It will be done based upon the interpretation, and that interpretations will be based upon the future data. Future data means what are going to be the scenario tomorrow? What kind of artistic demand will be there? And how can that artistic demand become commercial also, so that the students, when they pass out from those schools, they are also skilled enough, they are learned enough to be able to earn their bread as well. So this is called interpretation. After having interpretation, the goal and objectives will be settled. The goal and objectives would be settled in a way that yes, we have to generate the future artist in such a way that they have to be prepared in such a way not just to work for socially or their own aesthetic sense or the aesthetic sense of the society. Accordingly, we have to work upon that those artists should be able to should be employable enough. So here we can go for graphic teachings. We can also go for training them how to create beautiful packaging, advertisement. These are the linked fields with the artistic purview. So accordingly, we have to decide. So the characteristics of planning includes forecasting, includes interpretation, but these are not the steps, and also includes goals and objectives. And goals and objectives are the most important, and they are based upon the first of all observation. And observation, if it is visionary, then the goal and objectives are not just practical, positive, but also gives result which is of very much relevance in the future also. Then there has to be decision making. Decision making has to be at different level. Decision making has to be at the level of the people who are governing the system, that is the central level, the state level, and the apex body. And the decision making, of course, has to be done on day-to-day level also, on day-to-day base also, by the people who are working in the system. So educational planning is the preparation or pre-courses in the decision making process. It is to help to determine the optimal decisions or change rendered through decision making. So while educational administration is mostly about decision making, when we talk about educational planning, planning in education is only about deciding, not just decision making, but also about the other factors also. Another important characteristic of educational planning is operations optimization. What does operation optimization means? It means that educational planning is operations. That means it is performance improvement. It is being done for the improvement of the performance. It is for the enhancement of existing conditions rather than for those that exist in the uncertain future. It is to guide the actions of the operations. So it must result into the standard operating procedures, operation manuals, administrative guidelines, or system and policies. So accordingly, we have to operate, and that has to be optimized as well. Another important characteristic of educational planning is problem prevention. How can educational planning prevent the problem? Because this is the basic reason for doing educational planning. Planners should be able to visualize, see what kind of problem is going to be there after 5 years, 10 years or 15 years. And the school principal, the head of the institution, should be able to perceive, visualize what kind of problem would there be in her institution tomorrow, day after, or after 6 months or a year. That is why we have planning at a different time frame. We have the monthly planning as well as we have the quarterly planning, we have annual planning. And that is of relevance to the person who is doing and running educational management at the grassroots level. So educational planning is a kind of contingency anticipation or problem prevention. It should minimize the magnitude of the educational problem likely to be encountered at some future point. It should spell out the procedure to be followed if some crisis or contingencies arise. Another important characteristic is management change. Management change means educational planning is a part of the organization renewal. So MBO, PERT, these are the various techniques of forecasting. They are to be employed during the process of educational planning to make it successful. Because the purpose of educational planning is renewal. That is changing the management or introducing something new in the management or deleting the aspects which are not of relevance to the management. It provides a mechanism or a model or a tool for achieving specific objectives of the organization. So management change is also one of a very important characteristic of educational planning. Another important characteristic is complexity resolution. Educational planning is a complexity resolution. What does complexity resolution means? Complexity resolution means, let me take the definition as it has been given by Dror. Dror has said that planning is the process of preparing a set of decisions for action in the future directed at achieving goals by optimal means. So from this definition, what we gather is that planning would be taking up the process of preparing set of decisions. Why? For the actions which are directed for output in the future. And this is what decision making is. Decision making is not about the problem which exists. That is firefighting, friends. Decision making is about the problems which are going to come tomorrow. So every educational planner has to prepare a plan, has to prepare a organizational level or the state level or the central level. So accordingly, the level at which the planner is operating, accordingly they have to give a plan for the authorities to decide, or he himself to decide, or she herself to decide that what kind of decision making should they be taking, so that the educational planning is of better manner. Nivich defined it, the educational planning, as set of formal and rational activities that seek to anticipate conditions, directions and challenges at some future point. In the time for the purposes, notes of enhancing the readiness of the personnel and the organization to perform in the future. So from these two definitions, what we gather is that educational planning is for complexity resolution. And why and when will complexity come? If we are not prepared for it. And when will we not be prepared for it? When we are not visionary. And how to become visionary? For becoming visionary, one need not be a spiritual leader. One need to understand statistics. One need to understand what kind of problems exist and accordingly work upon the data, and deciding upon data come out with certain decisions. So this is very simple, and this is something which each one of us do in everyday affair as well. In every day we are working upon this kind of working. Now let us talk about that we have talked about these characteristics. Now let us talk about these characteristics in 4 divisions basically. 1. Educational planning has the future orientation. 2nd, it has goal orientation. 3rd, it is related to performance enhancement. And 4th, it is goal achievement by optimal means, and most people prefer to describe or define planning to make plans. So if we understand it, that what are the characteristics of planning from these 4 points, what we gather is that planning is for the means which exist. And how do we plan for that? To plan for that, what we require, the most important aspect which is required for planning is that we should have the forecasting. Only then we can have the future orientation. We should be knowing the grassroots reality. Only then we can have goal orientation. We should be visionary. Only then we can have performance enhancement. And of course, if we want to have goal achievement, that requires that we should be able to activate the plan provide the plan based upon it should be practically employable. The plan should be such that it can be employed. The plan should be such that it can be activated. And the people who are employing the plan and applying it, and the people who have given the plan, they should be at the same page. If they are at the same page, they have the understanding. Only then the goal achievement would be there, because usually it is seen that the people who plan and the people who are responsible for making it work, that is application of that plan, are different. So it's very much relevant, and it has been decided by educationists again and again. And the administration also understands that for plan to really work, the plan to be successful, it is very much important that during the planning, the grassroots level administrators or the grassroots level people should also be employed. They should also be part of it. If they are part of it, then those plans would be of better quality as well as capable of being applied as well. So friend, on this note, I take your leave. In the next lecture, that is part 2 of the same topic, that is educational planning for progressive school, we shall be discussing. Today we have discussed the characteristics. We have discussed what is school. We have also discussed the definition of the progressive school. We have also decided upon that why educational planning is so relevant. In my next lecture, I shall be talking about the principles of educational planning as well as types of educational planning, and how the educational planners, particularly the educational planners, have to be so specific as well as practical oriented so that it can be employed well, it can be applicable by the people who are working at the grassroots level. So how such plans should be creating, we shall also be discussing that in our next part of the series of lecture on this particular topic, that is educational planning for progressive school. On this note, I shall be taking your leave. I am signing off with the best wishes for your health. Be safe, be healthy. Namaskar, Jai Hind. Take care and thanks for being with me, listening to me during this lecture. Namaskar, Jai Hind.